In Victorian London, over 1 million people lived in crushing poverty, with hundreds of thousands experiencing homelessness or dwelling in squalid slums that reeked of human waste and disease. If you were unfortunate enough to end up on these brutal streets, your only protection from freezing to death, violent assault, or police harassment was to pay for one of 3 nightmarish shelter options: a penny sit-up, a 2-penny hangover, or a 4-penny coffin. Here's what life was really like for those forced to choose between these barely human sleeping arrangements. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in New Zealand listen to history stories to sleep? Alright, Victorian London tonight. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really, check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. The rain is coming down sideways. You can feel it seeping through the holes in your boots, through the threadbare coat that's more patch than original fabric. It's not even proper rain. It's that London mixture of water, soot, and God knows what else that turns everything it touches a shade darker. Night is falling, and you've got 3 pennies to your name. Now, I know what you're thinking. 3 pennies? That's nothing. But in 1880s London, 3 pennies is the difference between sleeping somewhat sheltered or not sleeping at all. It's the difference between maybe waking up tomorrow or definitely not. See, the police don't let you just sleep anywhere. That's not how Victorian London works. The moment an officer spots you nodding off in a doorway or under a bridge, you'll get a swift kick and an order to move along. The wealthy don't want to see you. You're a blemish on their pristine city. And in their eyes, your poverty is a moral failing. Something you've brought on yourself. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture of this city for a second. London in the 1880s was actually 2 cities existing in the same space. One was glittering with wealth, the centre of a global empire where 1/5 of the world's population was under British rule. This London had grand department stores, elegant restaurants and theatres, where the upper classes flaunted their ridiculous wealth. And then there was your London, a labyrinth of narrow, filth-choked alleys where raw sewage ran in open gutters, where families of 10 crammed into single rooms, where children with distended bellies from malnutrition played in streets littered with horse manure and industrial waste. You're basically thinking, this is fine, everything's fine, but it's not fine. None of this is fine. The smell alone would knock you flat if you weren't used to it. A visitor from the country once described it as the stench of 1,000 privies mixed with rotting vegetables and the unique aroma of unwashed humanity. That's putting it nicely. In reality, it was so much worse. You'd been working all day when there was work to be had. Maybe you were a mudlark wading through the sewage-filled Thames at low tide, looking for anything of value. Coins, pieces of coal, metal scraps. Maybe you were a crossing sweeper, clearing paths through the horse dung so wealthy ladies and gentlemen wouldn't soil their shoes. Or maybe you were a match girl, dipping matches in toxic white phosphorus that made your jaw literally rot away. Whatever your gig was, it earned you a handful of pennies. Not enough for proper lodgings, not nearly enough for that. So as darkness falls and the cold really starts to bite, you're faced with the nightly decision that thousands of London's poor had to make: where to sleep. Just go to the workhouse, some smart-ass middle-class reformer might suggest. Yeah, no, the workhouse is the absolute last resort. You know what happens there. Families split up, back-breaking labour, soul-crushing regimentation. People who enter the workhouse often don't come out. It's essentially prison for the crime of being poor. Someone in the street looks at you and says, "You don't want to end up in there, mate. Better to try your luck at one of them Sally Army places." The Sally Army, that's what people called the Salvation Army. Founded in 1865, they were trying something different. Instead of just preaching, they were actually doing something for the destitute. But don't get too excited. Their help came with conditions, and their shelters were far from luxurious. As you walk through the darkening streets, stomach gnawing with hunger, you mentally count your options. You've got 3 pennies. That means you've got choices. Terrible ones, but choices nonetheless. For 1 penny, you could get a sit-up. For 2 pennies, a hangover. And for 4 pennies, well, you're 1 penny short of the coffin. Okay, so picture this. You're trudging through the East End past gin shops and pawn shops and women selling themselves on corners, past children as young as 5 begging or picking pockets. The lucky ones are selling matches or flowers. The unlucky ones are doing much worse things to survive. A man next to you suddenly doubles over in a coughing fit. You step away quickly. Could be consumption. That's tuberculosis to you and me. Could be typhoid. Could be cholera. Disease spreads like wildfire through these streets, and no one's coming to put out the flames. Now, I should mention something important here. Nobody just casually ended up homeless in Victorian London. This wasn't like today, where sometimes a few bad breaks can land you on the street. No, Victorian homelessness was usually the result of a catastrophic chain of events that stripped away every single safety net you might have had. Maybe your husband died, leaving you with 5 children and no income. Maybe you lost your job when the factory mechanized and didn't need as many workers. Maybe you got injured and couldn't work. Maybe you were an orphan thrown out of the orphanage at 14 with no skills and nowhere to go. Whatever the reason, once you ended up on the streets, climbing back up was nearly impossible. The systems weren't designed to help you get back on your feet. They were designed to punish you for falling in the first place. You're now approaching Blackfriars, where one of the Salvation Army's largest shelters stands. From a distance, you can see a line already forming. Men in tattered clothes, women clutching shawls around their shoulders, a few children, though most homeless children didn't make it to shelters. They huddled together in alleys or under bridges, forming little protective groups. The closer you get, the more you can smell the assembled crowd. It's not their fault. When you haven't bathed in months and own only the clothes on your back, you're going to smell. You probably don't smell any better. "Hey, you going in?" asks a grizzled old man, missing most of his teeth. Better hurry if you want a spot. They fill up quick on cold nights. You nod and join the queue. Around you, people are coughing, muttering, arguing over spots in line. A woman is trying to quiet a fussy baby. An elderly man looks like he might collapse at any moment. "First time?" the toothless man asks. "Is it that obvious?" you reply. He laughs. A dry, rattling sound. Everyone remembers their first night in the sit-up. Name's Jack, by the way. Been doing this dance for years now. "What's it like in there?" you ask, trying not to sound as nervous as you feel. Jack scratches his matted beard. "Depends what you're paying for. Got all 3 pennies? Go for the hangover if you can. Sit-up's torture, I'll tell you that straight. Can't sleep sitting up, and they don't let you even if you could. Got monitors walking around making sure no one's head drops. Spend the extra penny, trust me." The line inches forward as the doors open. You can feel your heart pounding. This is it. Your first night in a homeless shelter. Something you never thought would happen to you. Inside, a stern-faced Salvation Army officer in a neat uniform takes your penny. The contrast between his clean appearance and the filthy crowd is stark. He looks at you without really seeing you. You're just another body to process. "New?" he asks, noticing your hesitation. You nod. "Straight through. Find a seat on the benches. No sleeping, no drinking, no fighting. Out at 6 in the morning. And with that, you're officially admitted to a penny sit-up. The hall is large and dimly lit by a few oil lamps that cast long shadows. Rows of wooden benches fill the space, already crowding with humanity. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and the lingering scent of whatever soup was served earlier. It's warmer than outside at least, though calling it warm would be a stretch. It's just less cold. You find a spot on a bench, squeezed between Jack and a man who's mumbling to himself. Across from you sits a young woman, maybe 20, with hollow cheeks and darting eyes. She catches you looking and glares. "What you staring at?" she snaps. "Sorry," you mutter, looking away. Jack leans in. "Don't mind Mary. Been on the streets since she was 13. Makes you prickly, that does." You look around and notice something else. There's absolutely nothing else in this room. No tables, no chairs, no beds, just benches and people. Hundreds of people, all trying to exist in this limbo between homelessness and the workhouse. A Salvation Army worker stands at the front of the room, Bible in hand. "Before we settle in for the night, we'll have a reading from Scripture and a prayer." Some groan quietly, others straighten up, genuinely interested. Most just stare blankly, too tired to care one way or another. This was part of the deal with Salvation Army shelters. They helped you, but they also preached to you. It was the price of admission, beyond the penny. After the sermon, which you barely hear through your exhaustion, the long night begins. And when I say long, I mean interminable. The bench is hard, pressing uncomfortably against your spine. Every time your chin drops to your chest and your eyes flutter closed, a monitor taps you with a stick. "No sleeping," they remind you. "Sit up." Around midnight, the man next to you, not Jack, the mumbler on the other side, starts coughing violently. Each hack seems to come from the depths of his lungs, wet and rattling. You try to edge away, but there's nowhere to go. "Consumption," Jack whispers. "Poor bastard won't last the winter." The night crawls by. Your back aches, your eyes burn, your stomach growls. The penny didn't include food, just the privilege of sitting on this bench. Now here's where I should mention something that the history books often leave out. The conversation, because despite the misery, despite the exhaustion, people talked, they shared stories, they commiserated, they even sometimes found moments of dark humour. "You know what they call this place?" Jack asks, gesturing around the grim hall. "What?" "The House of Despair," he chuckles. "Cheerful, innit?" A woman across from you joins in. "Better than what my Billy calls it. He says it's the waiting room for the cemetery." "Your Billy's not wrong," says another man. "Last winter I counted 7 what didn't wake up in here. Just found 'em sitting there, stiff as boards come morning." "That true?" you ask, horrified. Jack shrugs. More or less. Cold gets to some, sickness gets to others. Some just give up. The Reverend George Edwards, a vicar who once disguised himself as a vagrant to experience these shelters firsthand, described one such place as having the leaden weight of exhaustion and despair. He wasn't exaggerating. As dawn approaches, you haven't slept at all. Your body aches in ways you didn't think possible. Your eyes feel like they're full of sand. At precisely 6 in the morning, a bell rings. The Salvation Army workers begin ushering everyone out. No breakfast, no coffee, just back onto the streets you go. "Where do people go now?" you ask Jack as you stumble outside, the pale winter sun doing nothing to warm your bones. "Depends," he says. "Some try to find work. Some beg. Some go to the soup kitchens if they can find one. Most just wander until they can get enough pennies together for tomorrow night." And that's the brutal cycle of Victorian homelessness, scraping together enough to avoid sleeping on the streets, spending uncomfortable nights in barely human conditions, then being thrown back out to start all over again. As you stand there, watching your breath form clouds in the frigid morning air, you realise something. This is your life now. Tomorrow night, you'll have to make the same choice. 1 penny for a sit-up, 2 for a hangover, or somehow find 4 for a coffin. Unlike you right now, safely tucked in your warm, comfortable bed, these people had no certainty about where they'd sleep the next night. No guarantee of food, no promise of safety. The most fortunate might eventually find steady work, maybe even a room to rent. Most would continue this desperate cycle until disease, cold, or violence claimed them. The average life expectancy in Victorian slums was just 30 years. Jack claps you on the shoulder. "First night's the hardest," he says, though you're not sure you believe him. "Come on, I know where we might get some bread if we're quick." And with that, you follow your new friend into another day of survival in Victorian London, already dreading the night to come and wondering if you should save your pennies for a 2-penny hangover instead, because at least then you might actually get some sleep. But that, my friend, is a story for another part of our night. That's the penny sit-up, the cheapest and most miserable option for Victorian London's homeless. Next, we'll see what 2 pennies could buy you, and whether the so-called hangover was any improvement at all. Meanwhile, as you listen to this, maybe pull that blanket a little tighter. Feel the soft mattress beneath you, the clean sheets against your skin, the knowledge that you're safe, warm, and sheltered. These simple comforts would have seemed like unimaginable luxury to the homeless of Victorian London, forced to choose between the streets, the workhouse, or places like the penny sit-up, where even sleep was too much to ask for. Dawn breaks over London like it's doing you a personal favour, pale, weak light filtering through the infamous fog. Your back is one giant knot from the penny sit-up. Your empty stomach sounds like it's trying to digest itself. Welcome to another day of trying not to die in Victorian London. Jack, your newfound companion in misery, nudges you. "Come on, gotta move quick if we want breakfast." You follow him through streets already buzzing with activity. Children as young as 5 are heading to factories. Street vendors are setting up. Costermongers push carts piled with questionable vegetables. The whole machine of London grinding into motion, caring nothing for those it crushes beneath its gears. "Where are we going?" you ask, trying to keep up despite your exhaustion. Jack grins, revealing the few teeth he has left. Church mission on Whitechapel. They give bread and tea if you listen to a sermon. Small price to pay for a full belly. The mission is already crowded when you arrive. Dozens of men and women in various states of dishevelment stand in a ragged line. A stern-faced woman in a plain dress stands at the door, eyeing each person critically before allowing them inside. "No drunks," she announces loudly. "Anyone smelling of gin will be turned away." You glance at Jack, who shrugs. Gotta play by their rules if you want their bread. Inside, you're herded onto wooden benches. The smell of weak tea and day-old bread makes your stomach growl embarrassingly loud. The minister, a thin man with earnest eyes, stands before you all. "Before we feed your bodies, we must feed your souls," he intones. Jack leans over. "This one's not bad. Keeps it short. Some go on for an hour while your breakfast gets cold." The sermon is mercifully brief, 10 minutes of fire and brimstone about the evils of drink and how poverty is God's way of testing your moral fibre. You find it hard not to laugh at that last bit. Easy to moralise about poverty when you've got a warm bed and food in your belly. When it's over, you receive your reward. A mug of tea so weak you can see the bottom, and a chunk of bread that could break a window. Still, it's food. You devour it in seconds. Slow down, Jack advises. Make it last. Might be all you get today. What now? You ask, already dreading the answer. Now? Jack finishes his tea. Now we work. Got to get them pennies for tonight, don't we? And that's the brutal reality of street life in Victorian London, the constant hustle for pennies. Every single day you need to somehow scrape together enough money for that night's shelter. And if you want to eat, that's extra. What kind of work, you ask? Jack looks you up and down. Depends what you can do. Can you sing? You shake your head. Good with your hands? Strong back? You shrug non-committally. Well, he says, there's always pure finding. Pure finding? That's what we call it. Looking for things to sell. Anything. Rags, bones, metal, horse dung. Horse dung? Your face must show your disgust. Good money in it, Jack says defensively. Tanners buy it, and there's plenty of it around. He's not wrong. The streets of Victorian London were carpeted with the stuff. Over 300,000 horses lived and worked in the city, each producing around 35 pounds of manure daily. Do the math. That's millions of pounds of horse shit dropped onto London streets every single day. Come on, Jack says. I'll show you the ropes. For the next few hours, you follow Jack through the maze of London streets, learning the fine art of scavenging. He shows you which pubs put out decent scraps, which areas have the best pickings for rags, which policemen will look the other way if you're quick, and which ones take pleasure in giving you a beating. Never go near the rookeries alone, he warns, pointing toward a particularly grim-looking alley. That's the worst of the slums. Even the police don't go in there. You go in, you might not come out. The rookeries were London's most notorious slums. Places like Seven Dials, the Old Nickel, and parts of Whitechapel. They weren't just poor, they were dangerous labyrinths where crime was the primary industry. By midday, your pockets hold a few carefully collected items, some rags that might fetch a halfpenny, a piece of metal that could be worth something to the right buyer, and embarrassingly, a small bag of relatively fresh horse manure that Jack insists is good quality. Not bad for your first day, Jack appraises. Now we sell it. The Rag and Bone Shop is a dark, cluttered space that smells even worse than the streets. The owner, a corpulent man with fingers like sausages, barely glances at your findings. 3 farthings for the lot, he grunts. 3 farthings, Jack protests. Come on, Morris. The metal alone is worth a penny. 3 farthings. Take it or leave it. Jack sighs. We'll take it. Outside, Jack divides the money. There you go, your share, almost a halfpenny. Keep at it all day, you might earn your sit-up again. You stare at the pitiful coin in your palm, all that work for less than half a penny. This is impossible, you mutter. Welcome to London, Jack says, without sympathy. Better get back to it if you want a roof tonight. The afternoon passes in much the same way. You search, you scavenge, you occasionally find something worth a farthing. The work is exhausting, demeaning, and barely productive. By late afternoon, you've earned just over a penny. Jack seems impressed. Not bad for a first-timer. I've got about 2 pennies myself. Know what that means? What? A grin spreads across his weathered face. Tonight, we're upgrading. 2 penny hangover. You remember Jack mentioning this last night, the middle option between the sit-up and the coffin. What exactly is a 2 penny hangover, you ask? Jack's eyes sparkle with what passes for excitement in this bleak existence. Oh, you're in for a treat. Well, not a treat, but better than last night. As dusk approaches, your body aches from the day's scavenging. Your stomach growls again. That morning bread long since digested. But Jack seems determined to save your pennies for the shelter. food or sleep, he explains. That's the choice most nights. Can't usually afford both. You both head toward a different shelter than last night's, this one on the edge of Spitalfields. The same desperate crowd is already gathering, but there's a slight difference. These people have 2 pennies instead of 1. In the hierarchy of Victorian homelessness, that makes them practically aristocracy. 2 penny line on the left, barks a Salvation Army worker at the door. You and Jack join the queue, which moves slowly. When you finally reach the front, you hand over your precious 2 pennies. The admission feels momentous. You've literally worked all day for this upgrade. Inside, the room looks similar to the sit-up at first glance. Wooden benches in rows. Oil lamps casting weak light. The same smell of unwashed humanity. But there's one crucial difference. Running across the front of each bench, at about chest height, is a thick rope. That, Jack announces proudly, is what we pay extra for. You must look confused because he laughs. The rope, mate. That's your pillow for the night. You lean over it, see? Lets you actually sleep without falling over. It takes a moment for this to sink in. People are paying extra for the privilege of leaning forward over a rope to sleep. That's the upgrade. That's what 2 pennies buys. Find a spot, Jack advises. Ends of the rows fill up first. Nobody wants to be in the middle, too crowded. You manage to claim spots at the end of a bench. Around you, the room fills quickly. Men and women of all ages, though mostly older. Unlike the sit-up, children are rare here. Few families can afford the extra penny per person. A woman settles on the bench across from you. She's perhaps 50, though hard living makes it difficult to tell. Her face is a map of wrinkles, her hands red and raw from what must be laundry work. First time at the hangover? She asks, noticing your bewildered expression. You nod. You'll get used to it. She positions herself against the rope. Try to get your chest right over it. Distributes the weight better. You follow her advice, leaning forward until the rope presses against your sternum. It's uncomfortable, but oddly stable. With your weight balanced over the rope, you might actually be able to sleep without toppling over. Name's Ginny, the woman offers. You're not from London, you observe, noting her accent. Came from Manchester 10 years ago. Factory closed. Thought London would have more work. She snorts. Biggest mistake of my life. Jack leans in. Ginny's the queen of the hangover. Been doing this longer than anyone. 8 years in the 2 penny, she confirms with a strange pride. Never had to go back to the sit-up. Never quite made it to the coffin either. The coffin's overrated, Jack says. Too crowded. Bugs are worse. Bugs? You suddenly become very aware of the itching sensation that's been building all day. Ginny laughs. Oh, love, you've already got them. Everyone does. The lice are the least of your worries. You try not to think about what's crawling through your hair and clothes. Focus instead on the bizarre sleeping arrangement you're about to experience. Around the room, people are settling in. Some talk quietly. Others stare blankly ahead, already half asleep. A Salvation Army officer walks through the rows, Bible in hand, but doesn't stop for a sermon this time. Another blessing of the 2 penny, Jack whispers. They don't preach as much. Figure we've paid more, so we deserve less lecture. As the evening deepens, the room grows quieter. Despite the discomfort of the rope pressing against your chest, exhaustion begins to pull at you. Your head grows heavy, your eyes flutter closed, and amazingly, you sleep. It's not good sleep. It's not restful sleep. It's the sleep of absolute exhaustion, your body suspended awkwardly over a rope. But it's sleep, something you didn't get at all in the penny sit-up. Throughout the night, you drift in and out of consciousness. Someone nearby snores like a broken steam engine. Someone else sobs quietly. The rope digs painfully into your chest, and your back screams in protest at the unnatural position. But compared to last night, it's almost luxury. Until morning comes. At precisely 5 a.m, a commotion wakes you. Before you can fully understand what's happening, the rope suddenly goes slack. You and everyone else on your bench tumble forward, a tangle of limbs and curses. What the hell? You sputter, now fully awake and on the floor. Jack laughs, picking himself up. That's why they call it the hangover. They cut the rope to wake us up. Works every time. Around the room, people are groaning and pulling themselves up from the floor. Some laugh at the daily indignity. Others curse the Salvation Army workers who are now moving through the room, urging everyone out. Rise and shine, calls one worker with sadistic cheerfulness. God's given you another day. God can keep it, mutters Ginny, rubbing her shoulder where she landed. You stand, feeling new pains on top of yesterday's. Your chest has a perfect rope-shaped welt across it. Your back feels twisted, but strangely, you do feel somewhat better than yesterday. The 2-penny difference between sleeping and not sleeping. Outside, dawn is breaking through London's perpetual smog. Another day of scavenging awaits. Worth the extra penny? Jack asks. You consider the question. I think so. Good man, you're learning. He claps you on the shoulder. Now, there's a church on Commercial Street that does porridge if we hurry. As you follow Jack through the awakening streets, you pass a man sleeping in a doorway, or at least you think he's sleeping. The bluish tinge to his skin suggests otherwise. No one stops to check. Death on London streets was so common that it barely warranted a glance. Couldn't get his pennies yesterday, Jack says quietly, nodding toward the man. There but for the grace of God, eh? And that was the razor's edge that London's homeless walked daily. Each penny literally a matter of life and death. Each night a struggle to find enough shelter to see another dawn. The 2-penny hangover was marginally better than the penny sit-up, but only in the most technical sense. You still spent the night essentially vertical. You still woke to a rude awakening. You still started each day exhausted, hungry, and with nothing to your name except the clothes on your back. But at least with the hangover, you got some sleep. And in the brutal calculus of Victorian homelessness, that small mercy made all the difference. Ginny falls into step beside you. First time I used the hangover, she says conversationally, I thought it was the most degrading thing I'd ever experienced. Sleeping over a rope like an animal. She laughs bitterly. Shows what I knew. There are far worse ways to spend a night in London. Like what? You ask, immediately regretting the question. Her eyes darken. Like the flash houses down in the rookeries, like the opium dens, like the places where they'll give you a bed for free if you're a young girl. She spits on the ground. The hangover's a bloody palace compared to some options. You walk in silence for a while, digesting this. The hierarchy of Victorian poverty was complex and brutal. There were always lower depths to sink to. You know what keeps me going, Ginny says suddenly. The thought that someday I might save up 4 pennies, get myself into a coffin for a night, sleep lying flat like a proper human being. She smiles, revealing several missing teeth. That's my dream. Pathetic. Isn't it dreaming of a wooden box to sleep in? But it wasn't pathetic. In a world where simply lying down to sleep had become a luxury, dreaming of a wooden coffin-shaped bed was perfectly rational. And that, my friend, was the two-penny hangover, the middle option in Victorian London's homeless shelters. A rope to sleep against, a jarring awakening, a night slightly less miserable than the absolute worst. As you listen from the comfort of your bed, think about the last time you complained about your mattress being too soft or too firm. Think about the luxury of lying flat, of having multiple pillows, of being able to turn over in the night. These simple comforts would have seemed like unimaginable luxury to Ginny, Jack, and thousands like them, balancing precariously over ropes in the two-penny shelters of Victorian London. Next, we'll see what life was like for those who could afford the relative luxury of the four-penny coffin and discover whether sleeping in a box that resembled your final resting place was really the upgrade everyone dreamed it would be. But for now, feel the softness of your mattress beneath you, the gentle embrace of your blankets, the perfect support of your pillow, and be grateful that your sleep doesn't depend on a rope stretched across a bench in a crowded room, a rope that will be cut come morning, sending you tumbling into another day of desperate survival. Porridge at the church mission turns out to be a generous description. It's more like warm grey water with a few oats floating sadly on top. But it's hot, and that matters because summer is giving way to autumn in London. The mornings carry a chill that seeps into your bones. "Winter's coming," Jack says grimly, slurping his porridge. "You can feel it." Ginny nods. First-timers on the street never make it through their first winter, not without help. "Is it that bad?" you ask. They exchange a look that makes your stomach tighten. "Let me put it this way," Jack says. "Last winter I counted 17 people I knew who didn't see spring. Froze in doorways, drowned in the Thames. Coughing sickness took the rest." You're about to respond when a commotion erupts near the serving table. A man has collapsed, his bowl of porridge splattering across the floor. His body convulses, foam flecking his lips. "Falling sickness," Ginny mutters, not even looking up. "Poor devil." Two church workers drag the man outside, leaving him on the pavement. No doctor is called, no help offered. He's just another of London's discarded humanity, left to either recover or die on his own. "They won't let him back in," Jack explains. "Might scare off the donors if they see the real state of us." And that was the truth of Victorian charity. It extended only as far as propriety allowed. The moment illness struck, the already tenuous safety net disappeared entirely. After breakfast, your small group parts ways. Jack heads toward the docks to look for work. Ginny goes to a laundry where she sometimes gets day labour. You're left on your own, with less than a penny to your name and a full day ahead of finding enough for tonight's shelter. The streets feel different today. Rain threatens, heavy clouds hanging low over the city. Your clothes, never quite dry from yesterday, cling uncomfortably to your skin. Your shoes, more whole than leather now, squelch with each step. By midday, the rain arrives. Not the dramatic downpour that might drive people to shelter, but the persistent, miserable drizzle that London specialises in. It's the kind of rain that seems harmless until you've been in it for hours. Then you realise you're soaked to the skin, chilled to the bone. You've managed to earn a few farthings collecting bottles and selling them to a rag shop. Not enough for shelter yet. The pressure builds with each passing hour. A hacking cough catches your attention. Down an alley, a woman sits huddled against a wall, each cough shaking her thin frame. Blood spatters the cobblestones in front of her. Consumption, tuberculosis, the disease that killed more Londoners than any other. You hesitate, then walk on. There's nothing you can do for her. Nothing anyone will do. The hospitals won't take her kind. No money, no fixed address. Workhouse infirmaries are overcrowded death traps, so she'll sit there, coughing her lungs out onto London's streets until she doesn't anymore. That's when it hits you. The most terrifying aspect of homelessness in Victorian London isn't the daily struggle for pennies or the degrading sleeping arrangements. It's how easily you become invisible, how quickly society decides you're no longer worth saving. "You look lost," says a voice behind you. You turn to find a well-dressed man eyeing you with what might be concern or might be contempt. "Just looking for work," you reply cautiously. "Strong back. Can you lift?" You nod, hope flaring. "Come with me then. 2 shillings for the day." 2 shillings. That's 24 pennies. Enough for a week of hangovers or 6 nights in a coffin. It seems too good to be true. And of course, it is. The job turns out to be loading mysterious crates onto a cart in a back alley, clearly something illegal. Smuggled goods, stolen property. You don't ask and the man doesn't tell. When the work is done, instead of 2 shillings, he hands you 6pence. "That's not what you promised," you protest. His expression darkens. "It's 6pence more than you had. Take it or leave it." A knife appears in his hand, ending the negotiation. You take the 6pence, 6 pennies, still the most money you've had at once since arriving on the streets. Enough for 3 nights in a hangover, or 1 night in a coffin with enough left for food. As evening approaches, you find yourself at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. One road leads back to the 2-penny hangover, the familiar discomfort, the other toward the 4-penny coffin you've heard so much about. First time, you turn to see a boy, maybe 12 years old, with eyes far older than his face. "What? In the coffin?" "I can tell you're thinking about it." He grins, revealing gaps where teeth should be. "I work there sometimes. Sweep up." "Is it worth the extra pennies?" you ask. The boy shrugs. "Depends what you want. It's lying down in it, like a real bed, except it ain't." "What's your name?" "Billy." "You heading there now?" You weigh the 6pence in your palm. The sensible thing would be to stretch it out. 3 nights of hangover. But after 2 nights of sitting up or leaning over a rope, the thought of lying flat pulls at you with surprising force. "Yeah," you decide, "I am." Billy falls into step beside you. "I'll show you the way. Best to get there early. Fills up quick, especially when the weather turns." The sky has darkened, both with approaching evening and thickening clouds. The temperature drops noticeably. Your damp clothes cling to you, stealing body heat with each gust of wind. "Going to be a bad one tonight," Billy observes. "Might even snow early this year." "How long have you been on the streets?" you ask. "Born here," he replies matter-of-factly. "Never known nothing else. Me mum died when I was 7. Been looking after myself since." You try to imagine it, a 7-year-old alone in London's brutal streets. It seems impossible anyone could survive that. Yet here he walks beside you, a living testament to human resilience, or perhaps just blind luck. "There it is," Billy announces, pointing to a large, grim building. Unlike the church missions that house the sit-ups and hangovers, this looks purpose-built. A sign identifies it as a Salvation Army men's shelter. A queue has already formed despite the early hour. Men of all ages. Some women, too, though fewer than at the other shelters. These people have 4 pennies. They're the aristocracy of London's homeless. They give you tea and bread too, Billy informs you. Part of the 4 pennies. You join the queue, stomach growling at the mention of food. Despite your breakfast porridge, you're ravenous. Constant cold and movement burns calories you can't replace. As you wait, the wind picks up. Rain mixes with sleet. People huddle deeper into whatever passes for coats, sharing body heat in the queue. There's less talking here than at the hangover. These people have clawed their way up to the 4-penny shelter. They're not risking their spot by causing trouble. When you finally reach the front, you proudly place 4 pennies on the counter. The Salvation Army worker nods approvingly, as if your ability to produce 4 copper coins somehow makes you morally superior to those with only 1 or 2. Name? He asks. This is new. The other shelters didn't care who you were. You give your name. First time in the coffins? You nod. Rules are simple. No drinking, no fighting, no stealing. You get a coffin, a cup of tea, and bread. Out by 6 tomorrow. Break any rules, you're blacklisted. Inside, the difference from the other shelters is immediately apparent. The main hall has tables and benches where people sit drinking tea and eating bread. An actual meal of sorts. The air still smells of unwashed bodies and damp wool, but there's an underlying scent of soap. Someone has made an effort at cleanliness. You collect your tea and bread, finding a spot at a crowded table. The tea is hot and sweet, the bread fresher than you've had in days. It's still poor fare by any normal standard, but compared to what you've experienced lately, it's a feast. Coffin veteran? Asks the man beside you, a gaunt fellow with a sailor's weathered face. First time, you admit. He nods. Thought so. You've got that look. Like you can't believe you made it to 4 pennies. He extends a calloused hand. Name's Thomas. 20 years at sea, now washed up here. Quite literally. You shake his hand, introducing yourself. Word of advice? Thomas says, leaning closer. Check your coffin before you settle in. Sometimes they don't clean them properly between guests, if you catch my meaning. Your appetite diminishes slightly at the implication. Off to the meal, another Salvation Army worker appears at the front of the room. Coffin rooms open, orderly line, gentlemen. The room empties quickly, everyone eager to claim their box for the night. You follow the crowd down a corridor and into a large, open room lined with rows of wooden boxes on the floor. And here they are, the famous 4-penny coffins. Despite the name, they don't precisely resemble burial coffins. They're rectangular wooden boxes, about 6 feet long and 2 feet wide, lined up in neat rows across the floor. Each contains a thin mattress stuffed with straw and covered with a tarpaulin sheet. No pillow, no blanket. Choose a coffin and settle in, instructs the worker. Lights out in 30 minutes. People move quickly to claim boxes, some clearly having favourites or preferred locations. You hesitate, overwhelmed by the sight of so many grown adults climbing into wooden boxes like oversized children playing a macabre game. Thomas appears at your elbow. Back corner ones are best, he advises. Further from the door, less draft, and away from the snorers. You follow his advice, making your way to a back corner. The box looks startlingly small for an adult body. Following Thomas's advice, you inspect it carefully, checking for stains or signs that it hasn't been properly cleaned. It seems passable, worn but not filthy. Gingerly, you lower yourself into the box. The mattress is thin, the wooden sides press against your shoulders, and the tarpaulin sheet crinkles beneath you, but you're lying flat, actually horizontal. After 2 nights of sitting or hanging over a rope, it feels like unimaginable luxury. Worth the 4 pennies, eh? Thomas says from the neighbouring coffin. God, yes, you breathe, feeling your spine decompress for the first time in days. Around you, men settle into their boxes. Some immediately close their eyes, desperate for sleep. Others chat quietly with neighbours. A few sit up, looking around warily, hands clutched protectively around their meagre possessions. Trust is a luxury few can afford here. First time I slept in one of these, Thomas says, I thought it was the most degrading thing I'd ever experienced. Grown man sleeping in a box like an animal. He chuckles darkly. Shows what I knew. Now it feels like the Savoy Hotel compared to the alternatives. As you lie there, you notice something moving in the seam of the tarpaulin sheet, then another movement along the wooden edge of the box. Your skin begins to crawl, literally and figuratively. Bugs, Thomas confirms, noticing your discomfort. Can't escape 'em. The coffins are actually worse for bugs than the hangover. Wood gives them places to hide. Sure enough, as your eyes adjust to the dim light, you can see them. Bedbugs, lice, fleas, a veritable ecosystem of parasites that have made these coffins their home. They're feasting on you already, tiny pinpricks of pain as they bite. But exhaustion outweighs disgust. After days of little to no sleep, your body demands rest, bugs or no bugs. Your eyes grow heavy despite the discomfort. Just as you're drifting off, a racking cough erupts from a coffin across the room. Another joins it, then another. The symphony of illness surrounds you: consumption, bronchitis, influenza, the invisible killers that stalk London's poor. Coffin cough, Thomas murmurs. Gets worse in winter. Half these poor bastards won't make it to spring. You think of the sixpence in your pocket. Enough for one more night here, if you're careful. But what then? Winter is coming, as Jack warned. How will you survive when the real cold hits? When snow blankets the city and the Thames freezes over? When even the most meagre work dries up and charity stretches thinner than ever? Been on the streets long? Thomas asks. "Oh, not long," you reply. "You?" 3 years now, since my ship went down off Margate. Lost my papers, couldn't prove my experience. No captain will take on a sailor without papers. He sighs. "Never thought I'd end up here. Had a wife once, house in Limehouse, all gone now." That was the common thread among London's homeless, the razor-thin line between stability and destitution. One misfortune, one illness, one lost job, and the slide began. Once you fell, climbing back up was nearly impossible. The oil lamps are extinguished, plunging the room into darkness broken only by moonlight filtering through high windows. The coughing continues. Someone sobs quietly in a distant corner. Despite it all, sleep comes for you, the deep, exhausted sleep of someone horizontal for the first time in days, until the screaming starts. You jolt awake to chaos. A man thrashes in his coffin, shrieking about fire and water, night terrors, or perhaps delirium tremens, the withdrawal that tormented alcoholics when they couldn't afford gin. Salvation Army workers rush in, dragging the man out as he continues to scream. The room settles slowly, everyone on edge. This is far from uncommon. "Navy man," Thomas whispers. Gets the horrors sometimes. Thinks he's back on a burning ship. Sleep comes again, fitfully. You wake several times. From the cold, from the bugs, from the coughing that never quite stops. But compared to the sit-up, or even the hangover, it's paradise. You're lying down. Your body can actually rest. Morning comes too soon. At precisely 6, a bell rings and the room stirs to life. Men climb stiffly from their coffins, joints cracking, bodies protesting. "Up and out," calls a worker. "Breakfast in the main hall, then clear out." Breakfast is the same as dinner, tea and bread, but hot food twice in 12 hours feels like unimaginable bounty. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, knowing it might be your last meal of the day. Thomas joins you, his face grey with exhaustion despite the night's rest. "What's your plan?" he asks. "Find work," you reply. "Try to get another 4 pennies for tonight." He nods. "Good luck with that. Day like today, everyone's competing for the same pennies." Outside, your heart sinks. Snow falls steadily, covering London in a deceptive blanket of white that will soon turn to grey-brown slush. The temperature has plummeted overnight. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air. Winter has arrived early, just as Billy predicted, and with it, the deadliest season for London's homeless. You clutch your remaining 2 pennies, already feeling the cold seeping through your inadequate clothing. Enough for a hangover tonight if you can't earn more. But what about tomorrow night and the night after? As you stand there pondering your diminishing options, you spot Jack trudging through the snow, head down against the wind. He looks up, sees you, and changes course. "Survived the coffin, did you?" he asks with a grin. "Feeling like royalty now?" Despite everything, you smile. "It was actually worth it." Course it was. Lying flat like a proper human, he stamps his feet against the cold. But winter's here now. Game changes. How? His expression grows serious. Cold kills faster than hunger. Seen men freeze to death sitting up in the penny sit-up when it gets cold enough. Warm shelter matters more than anything now. Looking around, you see London transformed by snow, not into the Christmas card image of charming white-capped buildings, but into a killing field. Every surface covered in freezing dampness, every breath painful in your lungs, every moment outdoors drawing heat from your body that you cannot replace. "What do we do?" you ask. Jack sighs. "What we always do. Survive another day, find another penny, and pray that someone somewhere gives a damn about people like us." But in Victorian London, that prayer went largely unanswered. For every philanthropist like William Booth of the Salvation Army, there were thousands who turned blind eyes to the suffering on their doorsteps. For every shelter, inadequate as they were, there were countless who believed poverty was a moral failing rather than a social tragedy. And so you follow Jack into the snowy streets, another day of desperate survival ahead. The 4-penny coffin already seems like a distant luxury as you confront the brutal reality of winter. As you huddle under your warm blankets in your temperature-controlled room with your perfectly supportive mattress, think of those wooden boxes lined up on cold floors. Think of grown men and women grateful for the privilege of sleeping in something resembling their final resting place. Think of how easily any of us could find ourselves there, but for the grace of circumstance and time. Next, we'll see how London's homeless faced the deadly challenge of winter, and how the workhouse, that most dreaded of Victorian institutions, sometimes became the only alternative to a frozen death on the streets. But for now, appreciate the simple miracle of your bed, the luxury of warmth, the privilege of safety. These were dreams beyond reaching for those who called the 4-penny coffins home, night after cold Victorian night. Snow blankets, London, transforming the city into something from a Christmas card, if you're viewing it from a warm parlour with a roaring fire. From the streets, it's a different story. The beautiful white powder quickly turns to grey slush, seeping into your already damp shoes. The wind cuts through your inadequate clothing like it's not there at all. Your fingers and toes have gone from painful to worryingly numb. "Can't feel my feet," Jack mutters as you both huddle in a doorway, trying to escape the worst of the wind. Bad sign that. You've been on the streets for hours, trying to earn enough for shelter tonight. The snow has made everything harder. Few people venture out, meaning fewer opportunities to scavenge or beg. Those who do hurry past with heads down, clutching their coats tightly around them, ignoring the outstretched hands of the desperate. By mid-afternoon, you've earned just a single penny between you, nowhere near enough. "We're in trouble," Jack says, stating the obvious. His lips have taken on a bluish tinge that alarms you. "Got to make a choice soon." "What choice?" He looks at you grimly. "Workhouse or freeze? That's winter for you?" The workhouse. Even the word sends a chill through you that has nothing to do with the snow. You've heard the stories, everyone has. The deliberate humiliation, the back-breaking labour, the separation of families, the food barely fit for animals. "Isn't there another option?" you ask. Jack shakes his head. "Not in weather like this, not unless you've got pennies I don't know about." A woman hurries past, dropping a half-eaten meat pie into a snowbank as she goes. Jack lunges for it like a man possessed, brushing off the snow and dividing it with shaking hands. You both devour your portions in seconds, the first real food you've had all day. That's the problem with being poor in London, Jack says, licking grease from his fingers. It's not just that you've got no money, it's that being poor costs more than being rich. What do you mean? Rich folk buy coal by the ton, get the best price. We buy it by the scuttle, pay 4 times as much. They buy good clothes that last years. We buy cheap shit that falls apart in weeks. Everything costs more when you've got less. He spits into the snow. It's like the whole system's designed to keep us down. He wasn't wrong. Victorian London's economy was built on exploitation of the working classes, of women, of children, of anyone vulnerable. The rich got richer precisely because the poor stayed poor. As afternoon fades to evening, the temperature plummets further. Your shared doorway offers minimal protection from the elements. Already your joints are stiffening from cold, your body's desperate attempt to preserve core heat. We need to decide, Jack says, voice weak, workhouse or... He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. Death from exposure was common in winter. Bodies found frozen in doorways, under bridges, in alleyways. The newspapers barely mentioned it. Just another tally of London's unfortunates who hadn't survived the season. I've never been, you admit, to a workhouse. Jack's laugh is hollow. Count yourself lucky. Been twice myself. Swore never again, but... He gestures at the snow, still falling heavily. Beggars can't be choosers, eh? The decision made, you both struggle to your feet, limbs protesting after hours of inactivity in the cold. The nearest workhouse is in Whitechapel, a massive brick building that looms over the neighbourhood like a fortress or a prison. By the time you reach it, darkness has fallen completely. A queue has already formed outside the entrance. Men, women and children, all hollow-eyed and shivering, driven to this last resort by the killing cold. Remember, Jack murmurs as you join the line, once you're in, you're under their control. Do what they say, don't argue, don't complain, just keep your head down and get through it. The queue inches forward painfully slowly. A woman ahead of you clutches a small child to her chest, the little one's cough a wet, ominous sound in the frigid air. Will they separate them? You ask Jack, nodding toward the mother and child. His expression answers before his words do. Course they will. Men, women, children, all go to different wards. Might not see each other the whole time they're in. The woman must overhear because she clutches her child tighter, tears freezing on her cheeks. Just for tonight, she whispers to the little one, just till the snow stops. When you finally reach the front of the line, you're met by a porter with a face like a closed fist. He regards you and Jack with undisguised contempt. Names? He barks. You give them. Residence? Jack gestures vaguely. Streets. The porter sneers. Vagrants. Through there. You'll be processed. Processing turns out to be a clinical, dehumanizing experience. First, your clothes, filthy, vermin-infested, but yours, are taken away for disinfection. You're herded naked into a communal bath of tepid water, already grey from previous users. A harsh lye soap burns your skin as you scrub away weeks of grime under the watchful eye of a workhouse official. Mr. Spot, he says, pointing with his cane to your back. Scrub harder or you'll bring the bugs in. The humiliation is deliberate. Everything about the workhouse is designed to make you feel less than human, to punish you for the crime of being poor. After the bath, you're given the workhouse uniform, coarse, ill-fitting garments that scratch your skin and hang loosely on your malnourished frame. The shirt is stamped with the workhouse mark, branding you as a pauper for all to see. Men's casual ward, end of the corridor, the official directs. You'll get gruel at 6, work begins at 5 tomorrow morning. The men's casual ward is a long, narrow room with beds lined up against both walls. Not proper beds, but wooden platforms with thin straw mattresses. Still, after nights in sit-ups, hangovers, and even coffins, they look almost inviting. Almost. Because the ward is also teeming with humanity at its most desperate. Men coughing, moaning, some muttering to themselves, the air thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, disease and despair. Despite the disinfection, lice and fleas still jump freely between bodies. Better than freezing to death, Jack says, claiming 2 adjacent beds, but not by much. Gruel arrives at 6, a thin porridge that tastes of nothing but has the virtue of being hot. You devour it, licking the bowl clean. Around you, men do the same, some practically growling over their food like animals. Hunger reduces everyone to the same base instincts. Night falls early in winter, and with it comes an enforced silence. The workhouse master makes his rounds, striking his cane against the floor. Lights out. No talking. Anyone caught breaking the rules spends tomorrow in the stone yard, regardless of weather. The lights, meagre oil lamps, are extinguished, plunging the ward into darkness broken only by moonlight through high windows. Despite the crowding, despite the lice, despite everything, exhaustion and relative warmth combine to pull you towards sleep, until the screaming starts. A man 3 beds down shoots upright, shrieking about demons and fire. Immediately 2 workhouse guards appear, dragging him bodily from the ward as he continues to scream. "Where are they taking him?" you whisper to Jack. "Isolation cell. They'll leave him there till morning, maybe longer." "But he's obviously ill. Shouldn't they—" Jack cuts you off with a bitter laugh. Ill? Course he's ill. We're all ill in some way. Doesn't matter to them. You're not a person here. You're a problem to be managed. The night passes fitfully, the relative comfort of lying flat offset by the constant coughing, moaning and occasional crying around you. No one is allowed to rise, not even to use the single chamber pot at the end of the ward. Many soil themselves rather than risk the guard's wrath. Morning arrives with brutal efficiency, a clanging bell at 4:30 a.m. jolting everyone awake. Guards move through the ward, striking those slow to rise with wooden batons. Up work detail in 30 minutes. Anyone not ready gets no breakfast. Breakfast is the same gruel as dinner, this time stone cold. You force it down knowing you'll need the energy for whatever labour awaits. The men's work detail is divided, some to the kitchens, some to laundry, some to cleaning, but most, including you and Jack, are sent to the stone yard. Casual ward gets the worst jobs, Jack explains as you're herded outside. They want to make sure we don't get too comfortable, might decide to stay. The stone yard is exactly what it sounds like, an open courtyard where large stones are broken into smaller ones by hand. The broken stones are used for road building. It's mindless, back-breaking labour designed not for efficiency but for punishment. You're each given a hammer and led to a pile of rocks. Snow still covers the ground, the temperature well below freezing. 16 stone per man, announces the yard boss. No one leaves until their quota is met. For the next 6 hours, you break stones. The cold metal hammer blisters your hands. The stone chips fly, cutting your face and arms. Your back screams in protest. Your empty stomach cramps. But you keep going because the alternative is a night back on the freezing streets. Around midday, a woman's piercing wail cuts through the monotonous sound of hammers on stone. It comes from the workhouse infirmary, a sound of such primal grief that it stops even the guards in their tracks. "Another one gone," mutters the man working next to you, an elderly fellow with hands like gnarled tree roots. "Fever's going through the women's ward, something terrible." "Who was it?" someone asks. The old man shrugs. "Does it matter? One less mouth for them to feed?" That was the reality of workhouse death. Unremarkable, expected, often unmourned except by the immediately affected, bodies buried in unmarked paupers' graves, sometimes multiple to a plot to save space, names recorded in ledgers, then forgotten. You look at Jack, alarmed to see how grey his face has become. He sways slightly as he swings his hammer. "You all right?" you ask. He nods weakly. "Just hungry and cold. I'll manage." But you're not convinced. Jack has been on the streets far longer than you, his body already weakened by years of malnutrition and exposure. The workhouse labour might be the final straw. By late afternoon, when the winter sun is already setting, you've both met your quotas. Jack has had to stop several times, wheezing and coughing. You've covered for him when the guards weren't looking, breaking some of his stones alongside your own. Dinner is marginally better than breakfast and lunch, a thin stew with actual vegetables visible if you look hard enough. Jack barely touches his, a worrying sign. "Should eat," you urge. "Keep your strength up." He tries, managing a few spoonfuls before pushing the bowl away. "Can't, stomach's not right." In the ward that night, Jack's cough worsens. Each hack seems to come from deeper in his chest, a wet, rattling sound that draws irritated glares from nearby men trying to sleep. By morning, he can't rise for the bell. "Get up, you lazy sod," a guard shouts, raising his baton. You intercept, standing between them. "He's ill, needs the infirmary." The guard's face darkens. "Are you telling me my job, pauper?" You swallow hard. "No, sir, just he's really sick. Please." For a moment, you think the guard will strike you both. Then, unexpectedly, he sighs. "Infirmary's overcrowded as it is, but fine. Can't have him dying in the ward. Bad for morale." 2 workhouse attendants carry Jack away on a stretcher. You're not allowed to accompany him. Workhouse rules keep the wards strictly separated. As he disappears down the corridor, you wonder if you'll ever see him again. The workhouse infirmary was often just a holding area for the dying. Little actual medical care occurred. Diseases spread rapidly in the cramped conditions, turning minor illnesses into fatal ones. Your day proceeds as before, stone breaking in the bitter cold. Your hands have developed deep cracks that bleed when you grip the hammer. Your cough, milder than Jack's but persistent, draws concerned looks from the men around you. "You'll be next," the old man tells you matter-of-factly. Once it gets in your chest, that's it. That night, you inquire about Jack, the wardmaster consulting his ledger with obvious disinterest. "Typhus, most like," he says. "Infirmary's full of it. Doubt he'll last the week." Your stomach drops. Typhus, the workhouse fever, killed thousands every winter. Spread by the same lice that infested the casual wards, it was virtually a death sentence in these conditions. "Can I see him?" The wardmaster laughs. "This isn't a hospital, boy. It's a workhouse. You want visiting hours? Go to Guy's or Bart's." He looks up from his ledger with cold eyes. Not that they'd take him either, or you. London's hospitals rarely admitted the truly destitute. Those without funds or references were turned away to die in the streets or in workhouse infirmaries like this one. Another day passes, then another. The work, the meagre food, the fitful sleep in a ward full of misery. You ask about Jack daily, receiving increasingly impatient responses. On the 4th day, the wardmaster finally snaps. "He's dead. Yesterday morning, buried already. Now stop asking." The news hits like a physical blow. Jack, who survived years on London's merciless streets, who showed you the ropes, who shared his meagre findings with you, gone. Another nameless pauper in an unmarked grave. That night, staring at the ceiling of the casual ward, you make a decision. Despite the continuing snow, despite the killing cold, you can't stay here. The workhouse isn't saving lives, it's just collecting the dying in one convenient location. At dawn, instead of reporting for work detail, you slip away during the morning chaos. Your workhouse uniform marks you as a pauper, but it's better than nakedness in this weather. Your original clothes are gone, probably burned as too infested to save. Outside, London is buried under more snow. The temperature feels even lower than before, but somehow the icy air tastes like freedom after the miasma of the workhouse. You have nothing now, no money, no shelter, no Jack to guide you, just the clothes on your back and the knowledge that surviving winter on the streets will take more luck than skill. As you trudge through the snow, uncertain where to go, you pass a Salvation Army shelter. A penny sit-up that once seemed like the depth of misery. Now, after the workhouse, it looks almost welcoming. A Salvation Army officer stands outside, offering tickets for free soup to those willing to attend a prayer service. You accept gratefully, the paper ticket a flimsy lifeline in a drowning world. Inside, the prayer hall is packed with London's desperate, drawn by the promise of free food and momentary warmth. You find a space on a bench, body still aching from days of breaking stones. "Looks like you've been to the Spike," observes the man beside you, using the street name for the workhouse casual ward. You nod. "Bad this time of year?" he continues. "Fever going through all of them. You're lucky to be out." "My friend wasn't so lucky," you reply. He nods, understanding immediately. "Lost my brother same way last winter. It's how they manage the poor, innit? Let nature thin us out when there's too many to feed." The cynicism is shocking, but not inaccurate. Victorian London's approach to poverty wasn't to solve it, but to manage it, to keep it just contained enough to prevent riots, but never actually address the root causes. The Salvation Army officer begins his sermon, a passionate plea for sobriety and godliness. Around you, the assembled poor listen with varying degrees of interest, most just waiting for the promised soup. And yet, for all its faults, at least the Sally Army was trying. They offered shelter, however inadequate. They provided food, however meagre. They saw London's poor as humans worth saving, not problems to be contained. When the sermon ends, you collect your cup of soup. Thin but hot, with actual pieces of vegetable and meat visible. It's the best thing you've tasted in days. "They're opening an extra sit-up tonight," announces the officer, "due to the extreme weather. 1 penny or free if you've nothing." A murmur runs through the crowd. Free shelter is unheard of. Even in the depths of winter, London's homeless were expected to pay for the privilege of not freezing to death. That night, you claim a bench in the free sit-up. It's as crowded and uncomfortable as you remember. The hard bench, the prohibition against sleeping, the monitors with their sticks, but after the workhouse it feels almost like kindness. The woman with the coughing child is there too, both looking thinner than when you saw them enter the workhouse. You catch her eye, a moment of shared understanding passing between you. You both tried the workhouse, you both chose the streets instead, even in winter. Because sometimes freedom, even cold, hungry freedom, is preferable to the soul-crushing control of the Victorian poor relief system. As you sit on that hard bench, fighting sleep that would bring the monitor's stick down on your shoulder, you realise something. Jack was right. The whole system was designed to keep you down. The sit-ups, the hangovers, the coffins, the workhouse, all of them just different circles in London's poverty hell. None were meant to help you escape poverty. They were meant to manage you while you remained poor, to keep you alive, barely, while ensuring you stayed in your place. As you listen from the comfort of your warm bed, think about what it means to have options, to have agency, to not be at the mercy of systems designed to control rather than uplift. The Victorian poor had none of these luxuries. They existed at the whim of those who saw poverty as a moral failing rather than a structural problem. Next, we'll see how some attempted to change this broken system and whether Victorian society was capable of seeing its poorest members as fully human. But for now, feel the freedom of your soft mattress, the dignity of your private space, the luxury of sleeping without permission. These simple rights denied to London's homeless might be the greatest privilege of all. Morning comes with brutal clarity. Your body aches from another night on the hard bench. The sit-up monitor raps his stick on the floor, startling awake anyone who managed to doze despite the rules. Out everyone outdoors, reopen at 8 tonight. Outside, the world is white and silent. Snow fell heavily overnight, transforming London into something almost beautiful, if you could ignore the bone-deep cold seeping through your workhouse-issued clothes. With Jack gone, you're adrift. No guide, no friend, just another anonymous face in London's sea of desperate humanity. "First winter?" asks a voice beside you. You turn to find the woman with the coughing child, both bundled in threadbare shawls. The child looks marginally better than before, though still alarmingly thin. "On the streets, yes," you reply. She nods. "Thought so. You've got that look, like you can't believe this is happening to you." She shifts her child to her other hip. "I'm Ellen. This is Maggie." She looks better. Ellen's face softens. The mission doctor gave her something for the cough. Don't know what, but it helped. She studies you. "You're alone now, aren't you? Your friend from the workhouse?" You nod, throat suddenly tight. "Come with us then," she decides. Safety in numbers, especially this time of year. And so you join Ellen and Maggie on their daily rounds, a circuit of London carefully designed to maximise charity while minimising harassment. First to a church kitchen that offers bread and tea in the mornings, then to a public pump for water, then to a sheltered alley where other women and children gather for mutual protection. "Men don't bother us much here," Ellen explains. "Too many eyes watching, and Reverend Shaw comes by most days, brings blankets sometimes." The alley is a revelation, a tiny pocket of community among London's homeless, women sharing what little they have, watching each other's children, warning of dangerous men or overzealous police. It's not safety, not really, but it's better than complete vulnerability. "How long have you been—" You trail off, unsure how to phrase it politely. "On the streets," Ellen finishes for you. 3 years now. Maggie was born in the workhouse. She strokes her daughter's hair. Her father was a good man, cabinet maker, got crushed when a stack of lumber fell. After the funeral, couldn't keep up the rent. She shrugs, the simple gesture containing volumes of grief and resignation. Her story is depressingly common. Victorian London offered precious little support for widows with children. With no husband and no family to take them in, the slide from working poor to destitute happened with terrifying speed. Around midday, a well-dressed gentleman enters the alley, accompanied by a younger man taking notes. The women straighten, suddenly alert. "It's all right," Ellen murmurs. "That's Mr. Booth. He's one of the good ones." The name means nothing to you, but the reverent way she says it suggests importance. The gentleman approaches, removing his hat despite the cold. "Good afternoon, ladies. Might I ask you a few questions?" His companion readies his pencil, watching intently. Ellen nods. "What do you want to know, Mr. Booth?" "Your current circumstances, where you sleep, what you eat, how you manage." His voice is gentle but direct. "I'm conducting a survey of London's poor. The truth must be documented if things are to change. And for the next hour, that's exactly what he does. Documents." He asks questions about shelters, about workhouses, about street survival. He listens without judgment, his companion's pencil scratching constantly. "Who is he?" you ask Ellen when they move to speak with other women. Charles Booth. He's mapping poverty in London, every street, every alley, showing the rich folk what's really happening. She says his name like he's some kind of saviour. Been at it for years now. They say he's even gone undercover in the sit-ups and doss houses to see for himself. Charles Booth was indeed conducting one of the most comprehensive studies of poverty ever attempted. His inquiry into life and labour in London would eventually fill 17 volumes and take him 17 years to complete. His poverty maps, colour-coded to show different levels of destitution, revealed the true scale of London's crisis. Does it help, you ask, all this documenting? Ellen considers the question. Maybe not us, directly, but they say Queen Victoria herself has seen his work. Parliament too can't ignore what's put right in front of them, can they? But of course, they could, and often did. Victorian society excelled at ignoring inconvenient truths about the consequences of industrialisation and unchecked capitalism. Before leaving, Booth approaches you specifically. "You're new to this life," he observes. Not a question. You nod. Would you be willing to share your experience? The transition from employed to... He gestures vaguely at your surroundings. The public needs to understand how easily it can happen. There's something compelling about his earnestness. You find yourself telling him everything. Your arrival in London, meeting Jack, the progression from sit-up to hangover to coffin to workhouse, the daily struggle for pennies, Jack's death. His companion's pencil never stops moving, capturing every word. Booth listens with complete attention, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just absorbing your story. "People believe poverty is a choice," he says when you finish. "A moral failing. They must be shown otherwise." He reaches into his pocket, extracting a coin. "This is not charity, but payment for your time and expertise. Your story will help others understand." He presses a shilling into your palm. 12 pennies. Enough for 3 nights in a coffin, with change left for food. The sudden wealth is dizzying. As Booth departs, Ellen watches approvingly. "Told you, one of the good ones." Later, huddled with Ellen and Maggie in the relative shelter of a shop doorway, you share the bread your unexpected wealth has purchased. The simple act of giving rather than receiving creates a warm glow that has nothing to do with physical temperature. "There are others like him," Ellen says, breaking her bread into tiny pieces for Maggie. "People studying us, writing about us. Some just want to gawk like we're animals in a zoo, but others actually want things to change." She tells you about Henry Mayhew, whose interviews with London's poor, shocked, polite society years earlier, about Lord Shaftesbury, whose factory reforms saved countless children from industrial slavery, about Dr. Barnardo rescuing homeless children from certain death on the streets. "And then there's the General," she adds with a smile. The General? William Booth, no relation to Charles, runs the Salvation Army. You think of the stern-faced Salvation Army officers at the sit-ups and hangovers. They don't seem particularly revolutionary. Ellen laughs. Maybe not now, but when the General started, people thought he was mad. Preaching in the slums, feeding the destitute, letting women be officers with equal rank to men. Proper scandal, that was. William Booth had indeed revolutionised Christian outreach to the poor. His Darkest England scheme proposed comprehensive solutions to poverty, from city shelters to farm colonies, from employment bureaus to missing persons services. It wasn't perfect, but it acknowledged something radical, that the poor deserved more than punishment for their condition. As afternoon turns to evening, your thoughts turn to shelter for the night. With 12 pennies, you have options that would have seemed luxurious just yesterday. Will you go back to the sit-up? You ask Ellen. She shakes her head, taking Maggie to the women's shelter on Hanbury Street. Salvation Army runs it. Children allowed, costs tuppence each, but it's clean and they don't separate us. The Hanbury Street Women's Shelter was one of the Salvation Army's better facilities, focusing particularly on mothers with children, the most vulnerable of London's homeless population. What about you? Ellen asks. Back to the coffin with your riches? You consider it. After the sit-up and workhouse, the fourpenny coffin sounds like paradise, but something holds you back. The memory of Jack coughing his life away, the knowledge that even the best homeless shelter is still a breeding ground for disease. Actually, you say slowly, I was thinking of something different. Which is how you find yourself that evening in a place you never expected to be, a model lodging house run by the Peabody Trust. At sixpence a night, it's far more expensive than the coffins or hangovers, but still within reach thanks to Booth's payment. The difference is immediately apparent. The building is purpose-built, not a repurposed warehouse. The dormitory is clean and well ventilated with actual beds, narrow and simple, but real beds with mattresses and blankets. There are washing facilities with soap and towels. The other lodgers are poor but respectable. Labourers, dock workers, street vendors. The working poor rather than the destitute. First time? Asks the clerk as you pay your sixpence. You nod, still stunned by the relative luxury. Rules are simple. No drinking, no fighting, out by 8 in the morning unless you pay for another night. Breakfast available for an extra halfpenny. The dormitory houses 30 men, each in his own narrow bed. Privacy is minimal, but after the packed floors of the sit-up or the coffin-like boxes of the fourpenny, it feels almost decadent. Your neighbour is a stonemason named Williams, his hands permanently grey with dust, fingers gnarled from years of work. Used to have my own place, he explains over dinner, a bowl of actual stew with real meat served in the lodging house dining room. Then the arthritis got too bad for fine work. Can only manage rough cutting now, not enough to rent rooms, but enough for here most nights. Like everyone you've met on London's margins, Williams balances perpetually on the knife edge between barely surviving and complete destitution. Better than the spikes and pennies, though, he adds, seeing your expression. Tried a coffin once, got more vermin than sleep. The model lodging houses represented a new approach to housing London's poor, the belief that decent accommodation could and should be provided at affordable rates. The Peabody Trust, the Metropolitan Association for Improving the Dwellings of the Industrious Classes, and similar organisations aimed to prove that housing the poor needn't be merely charitable, it could be sustainable. That night, lying in an actual bed with an actual blanket, you experience something that has become foreign, comfort, not luxury by any normal standard, but compared to the brutal realities of the sit-ups, hangovers and coffins, it's practically palatial. You sleep deeply for the first time in weeks, waking refreshed as sunlight streams through large windows. The sixpence was well spent, but it also highlights the fundamental cruelty of Victorian London's approach to homelessness, the vast gulf between the bare survival options of the sit-up and the basic human dignity of the model lodging house. For just a few extra pennies, a person could sleep in relative comfort and safety rather than hanging over a rope or lying in a wooden box. Yet those pennies might as well be pounds for most of London's destitute. Over breakfast, porridge with actual milk and sugar, worth every farthing. You listen to the conversations around you. These men aren't the completely broken souls of the sit-ups and coffins. They're the working poor, scraping by day to day, holding on to the bottom rung of respectability with bloodied fingernails. "Heard they're opening another Roten house in Whitechapel," says one man. "About time," replies another. "Waiting list at the Camden one is weeks long." Lord Roten's lodging houses represented the pinnacle of Victorian accommodation for working men. Private cubicles instead of open dormitories, reading rooms, dining halls, even bathing facilities. At sixpence a night, they were unattainable dreams for most of London's homeless. But they established a new standard for what housing the poor could look like. After breakfast, you step back onto London's snowy streets with renewed purpose. Your shilling will last another day or two if you're careful. After that, it's back to scavenging for pennies, but you've glimpsed another way, a system that treats the poor as humans rather than problems to be contained. The day passes in exploration rather than desperate penny hunting. Free from immediate need, you're able to see London differently. You visit Whitechapel's library, warming yourself by their fire while reading newspapers. You walk through Spitalfields Market, watching the commerce that keeps London fed. You even venture into the city proper, marvelling at the stark contrast between its wealth and the squalor just streets away. By late afternoon, you find yourself outside a building on Mile End Road with a sign identifying it as Toynbee Hall. People come and go freely, some well-dressed, others clearly working class. Curiosity draws you inside, where you discover something unexpected. A settlement house, where university graduates live and work alongside the poor, teaching classes, providing legal aid, offering medical assistance. "Can I help you?" asks a young man with spectacles and an Oxford accent. "Just looking," you reply, self-conscious of your workhouse clothes. "Well, we have a lecture on public health at 5, free to all, and soup afterward." He smiles. "You're welcome to both." The lecture hall fills with an improbable mix of people, labourers still in work clothes, middle-class reformers in neat suits, charity workers, teachers, even a few people clearly as destitute as yourself. The lecturer, a physician from London Hospital, speaks passionately about the connection between housing conditions and disease. "Tuberculosis is not a moral failing," he insists, pointing to charts showing infection rates across different neighbourhoods. "It's the direct result of overcrowding, poor ventilation, and inadequate sanitation. We cannot pray away these diseases. We must build them away." Around you, heads nod in agreement. There's something powerful happening here. A recognition that poverty isn't simply the result of personal failings, but of systemic problems requiring systemic solutions. Afterward, over surprisingly good vegetable soup, you fall into conversation with a young woman who introduces herself as a resident of Toynbee Hall. "I studied economics at Cambridge," she explains. "Now I help people navigate the poor law system, apply for assistance, find employment." "Does it work?" you ask. "All this reform?" She considers the question seriously. Sometimes. For individuals, often yes. For the system as a whole, she sighs. Change is glacially slow, but it is happening. 20 years ago, a place like this wouldn't exist. The idea of university graduates living among the poor was unthinkable. The settlement house movement represented a new approach to poverty, not just charity from afar, but direct engagement, living among the poor, understanding their challenges firsthand, working alongside them, rather than dictating solutions from comfortable drawing rooms. As evening approaches, you bid farewell to Toynbee Hall, your mind buzzing with new ideas. For the first time since arriving on London streets, you feel something dangerous, hope, not for immediate rescue from your circumstances, but for the possibility that the system itself might eventually change. With enough for another night at the model lodging house, you return to its relative comfort, grateful for the temporary reprieve from the sit-ups and hangovers, but you know this is borrowed time. Soon enough, you'll be back to the penny-by-penny existence of London's truly destitute. Williams the stonemason is there again, his arthritis visibly worse today. Bad weather for old bones, he explains, rubbing his gnarled hands. Won't be able to work tomorrow if this keeps up. What happens then, you ask? His expression darkens, back to the spike most like, till I can earn enough for this place again. And there it was, the brutal cycle of Victorian poverty. Even those like Williams, skilled workers with decades of experience, were just one bad day away from the workhouse or the penny sit-up. That night, as you lie in your temporarily comfortable bed, you reflect on the vast gulf between London's approaches to homelessness, from the deliberate humiliation of the workhouse to the simple dignity of the model lodging house, from the bare survival of the sit-up to the community support of Toynbee Hall. The difference wasn't just in conditions, but in fundamental philosophy. Did the poor deserve punishment or assistance? Were they moral failures or victims of circumstance? Was poverty a... On June 14th, 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte, first consul of France, faced complete defeat at the Battle of Marengo when 30,000 Austrian troops surprised his scattered forces. By mid-afternoon, his army was in full retreat and victory seemed impossible, but within hours, one of history's most dramatic battlefield reversals would cement Napoleon's legend and change the fate of Europe. Here's what it was really like to experience Napoleon's greatest comeback. Before we start, if these stories help you sleep, hitting subscribe would be amazing. And I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop your location and time in the comments. Sometimes I see someone from Tokyo commenting at what's like 3 a.m. my time. Okay, tonight we're heading back to the Napoleonic Wars. But before we go anywhere, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second, adjust your pillows, fix that blanket. Where we're going, you're definitely going to want to be settled in. Your eyes flutter open to a damp grey dawn in northern Italy. The first thing that hits you is the soreness. Every muscle in your body aches like you've been trampled by horses. You're not in your cosy bed with its memory foam and clean sheets. No, you're sprawled on hard-packed earth with only a thin, scratchy wool blanket between you and the ground. The June morning should be warm, but there's a chill that seeps right into your bones from the rain-soaked soil beneath you. Around you, thousands of French soldiers are stirring in the pre-dawn light. The smell is, let's just say, an army of men who haven't bathed in weeks creates its own special aroma. Sweat, leather, gunpowder, and something else, that underlying tension that comes before battle. Up. Get up. Citizen. The Austrians are moving. The shout jolts you fully awake. The year is 1800, and you're a soldier in Napoleon Bonaparte's army of reserve, and this day, June 14th, will become one of the most legendary in military history, though right now it just feels like another miserable morning in a foreign country where people keep trying to kill you. You scramble to your feet, grabbing your musket. Your stomach growls painfully. Dinner last night was a half ration of mouldy bread that you had to choke down with some questionable water. The supply wagons are somewhere far behind the army, and foraging parties haven't brought back much. Napoleon's bold strategy of crossing the Alps has gotten you behind enemy lines, but it's also gotten you pretty damn hungry. "They're saying the Austrians are attacking from Alessandria," mutters the soldier next to you, a grizzled veteran named Marcel with a magnificent moustache and a missing front tooth. But that can't be right. The first consul said they'd be retreating. That's the thing about Napoleon Bonaparte. He's a military genius, sure, but even geniuses make mistakes, and this morning he's made a big one. See, Napoleon's convinced that the Austrian army under General Michael von Mehlers is trying to escape east, so he spread his forces out across miles of countryside to catch them. You and about 15,000 other French troops are around the village of Marengo, while another 10,000 are scattered elsewhere. It's a smart plan if the enemy is actually retreating, but they're not. As the morning fog lifts, an unmistakable sound rolls across the plains like distant thunder, cannon fire, a lot of it. "Holy shit," Marcel whispers, his face going pale beneath his weathered tan. "That's a full attack. Within minutes, officers are shouting orders, drummers are beating assembly, and your regiment is forming up. Through gaps in the morning mist, you catch glimpses of the Austrian army emerging from Alessandria, not retreating at all, but advancing in full force, 30,000 men with over 100 cannons against your scattered 15,000 with barely a dozen guns. Wait. This can't be right. Napoleon is supposed to be the one surprising enemies, not the other way around. But here you are. The first consul was wrong, someone says nearby. We're completely outnumbered. And just like that, you're marching forward into what might be the last day of your life. See, Napoleon Bonaparte's not actually with you. That's another problem. He's miles away at his headquarters, convinced the Austrians are retreating, not attacking. By the time messengers reach him with news of the assault, precious hours will be lost. The initial Austrian attack hits like a hammer. Their artillery opens up and the sound is deafening, not just the boom of the cannons, but the whistling shriek of round shot tearing through the air, followed by the sickening thud when it finds its target. You watch in horror as a cannonball rips through your formation, taking 3 men with it in a spray of red. Your regiment forms up along a small stream called the Fontenone. It's not much of a defensive position, just a narrow waterway with steep banks, but it's all you've got. The orders are simple. Hold this line at all costs. The Austrians come in waves, their white uniforms standing out against the green fields. Their first assault hits the French centre, where General Victor's division is positioned. Your own regiment is part of General Lanz's division, off to the right flank. "Oh, steady," your captain shouts. "Wait for the order." The first Austrian attack is repulsed. Men cheer around you. Maybe this won't be so bad after all, but then you look west and your heart sinks. More Austrian columns are forming up, a lot more. "I've been in 12 battles," Marcel says, calmly reloading his musket, "and I've never seen odds this bad." "Then why are you so calm?" you ask, your own hands shaking as you try to reload. He shrugs. "If today's my day, it's my day. Besides, I've seen the little corporal pull off miracles before." The little corporal, that's what veterans like Marcel call Napoleon, a nickname from his early days as a young artillery officer. But right now, the little corporal is nowhere to be seen and his soldiers are in serious trouble. The second Austrian attack is stronger than the first. They've brought up more artillery, and the French line along the Fontenone is being pounded mercilessly. The air fills with smoke so thick you can barely see 20 paces ahead. The roar of gunfire becomes continuous, not individual shots, but a rolling thunder of muskets and cannon. Time loses meaning in battle. Minutes stretch like hours. Hours compress into moments. The fighting along the Fontenone continues throughout the morning, attack after attack. The stream's water runs red in places. The bodies pile up on both banks. By noon, the situation is dire. The Austrians have found a gap north of your position and are threatening to outflank the entire French line. General Victor's division in the centre is running dangerously low on ammunition. Some units have completely run out, reduced to using their muskets as clubs or throwing stones. Then the worst happens. The Austrian weight of numbers finally tells. Their 30,000 men and 100 guns against the French, 16,000 men and 15 guns is simply too much. First one French regiment breaks, then another. The retreat begins, and once it starts, it's hard to stop. Your captain shouts for an orderly withdrawal, but there's nothing orderly about what follows. The French line collapses, and suddenly you're running eastward across those same fields you defended all morning. Austrian cavalry appears, charging into the retreating French infantry. Men who stop to make a stand are cut down. "Stay together," Marcel shouts over the chaos. "If we scatter, we're dead." Your regiment manages to maintain some cohesion as it falls back, fighting a desperate rearguard action. But all around you, the French army is disintegrating. By 3 in the afternoon, the battle seems utterly lost. The French have been driven back almost a mile from their original positions, leaving behind their dead, their wounded, and most of their artillery. This is what defeat looks like. Complete catastrophic defeat. And somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, a messenger finally reaches Napoleon Bonaparte with the news that his army is fighting for its life. The story goes that when Napoleon heard the distant sound of cannon fire that morning, he dismissed it. Just a reconnaissance in force, he supposedly said. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, first consul of France and arguably the greatest military mind of his generation, could make a colossal misjudgment. By the time he realizes his error and races toward the battlefield, the situation appears hopeless. The French army that had marched triumphantly over the Alps is now streaming eastward in retreat, pursued by victorious Austrians. You're exhausted, parched and terrified as you stumble across the plains east of Marengo. Your unit has been reduced to perhaps half its original strength. Marcel is still with you, blood streaming from a minor wound on his forehead but otherwise intact. "This is it," someone nearby says. "The campaign is over. We'll be lucky to make it back to France alive." The retreat continues throughout the early afternoon. The Austrian pursuit, thankfully, isn't particularly aggressive. General Melas, the 70-year-old Austrian commander, believes he's won a decisive victory. So confident is he in his triumph that he returns to Alessandria to write his victory dispatch, leaving his chief of staff, General Zach, to handle the pursuit. It's a decision that will go down as one of the worst in military history. Around 5 o'clock, as your shattered regiment reaches the village of San Giuliano, something unexpected happens. Fresh troops appear on the road, French troops, marching westward toward the sound of battle, not away from it. "Who are they?" you ask, staring in disbelief. Marcel squints, then breaks into a gap-toothed grin. "That's Desai's division. They've come back." General Louis Desai had been detached from the main army with his division of 5,000 men to block what Napoleon thought would be the Austrian escape route. When Desai heard the distant sound of battle, he turned his division around and marched to the sound of the guns, a soldier's most sacred duty. Now, as the sun begins its westward descent, Desai's fresh troops are arriving on the battlefield, and with them is Napoleon himself, rallying the retreating soldiers. "I've gone far enough for today," Napoleon announces to his men. "It is my habit to sleep on the field of battle. The effect on morale is electric. Retreating soldiers stop in their tracks. Scattered units reform. Napoleon, the master psychologist as well as the master strategist, knows exactly what his demoralized army needs to hear." Wait, am I making this up? Did he actually say that? Look, Napoleon was basically a walking quote machine. Half the things attributed to him were probably made up later, but it makes for a damn good story, right? Desai reportedly tells Napoleon, "This battle is completely lost." But it's only 3 o'clock. There is still time to win another. And that's exactly what they set out to do. Napoleon quickly develops a new plan. While the remnants of his battered army reform their lines, Desailles' fresh division will prepare a counterattack. General Marmont gathers all available artillery, just 18 guns, and positions them to blast the advancing Austrians. Meanwhile, General Kellerman's heavy cavalry, which has remained relatively intact, is held in reserve for the decisive moment. The Austrians, believing they're simply mopping up a defeated enemy, advance in a long column along the main road, their guard down. It's General Zach leading the Austrian advance guard of Grenadiers elite troops, but moving forward with the casual confidence of men who think the fighting is over. They have no idea what's about to hit them. At about 5:30, Desailles' division strikes. The 9th Light Regiment leads the attack, pouring heavy fire into the surprised Austrians. For a moment, the Austrians waver, but then begin to form up to meet this unexpected threat. It's at this critical moment that tragedy strikes. General Desailles, leading from the front as always, is shot through the heart and dies instantly. His last words, according to legend, tell the first consul that I die regretting that I have not done enough to live in posterity. Again, with the suspiciously perfect last words. I mean, who knows if he actually said that? The guy just got shot through the heart, not exactly prime time for eloquent speeches, but it's one of those stories that's too good to not tell. The death of their commander could have broken the French attack. Instead, it galvanizes Desailles' men. Avenge our general becomes their battle cry as they surge forward with renewed fury. And then comes the masterstroke. As the Austrians struggle to deploy from column into line to meet Desailles' infantry attack, Napoleon gives the signal. General Kellerman's 400 heavy cavalrymen mounted on massive horses and armed with long straight swords charge directly into the Austrian flank. The impact is devastating. The Austrian grenadiers, caught in an awkward formation and hit from an unexpected direction, crumble under the cavalry charge. Within minutes, what had been a victorious Austrian army disintegrates into panic. Over 2,000 surrender on the spot, including General Zach himself. The French counterattack spreads across the battlefield like wildfire. Units that had been retreating in defeat just hours earlier are now charging forward, driving the stunned Austrians back toward Marengo and the Bormida River. By nightfall, the battlefield that had witnessed a decisive Austrian victory at 3 o'clock has, by some military miracle, transformed into a decisive French victory by 7. The Austrians retreat in disorder across the Bormida, leaving behind thousands of dead, wounded, and captured. You and Marcel, who hours earlier had been certain you were facing defeat and possibly death, now find yourselves standing victorious on the same ground you'd been forced to abandon. The cost has been terrible, nearly 6,000 French casualties, but the Austrians have lost even more heavily, with 8,000 killed, wounded, or captured. As darkness falls, Napoleon Bonaparte stands triumphant on the battlefield of Marengo. This victory, snatched from the jaws of defeat, will cement his position as first consul of France and pave the way for his eventual coronation as emperor. And as for you and Marcel, you're alive, which is more than can be said for many of your comrades. You're exhausted, hungry, and blood-spattered, but alive. The next morning, the Austrian commander, General Melas, the man who'd been so confident of victory that he'd returned to Alessandria to write his triumphant dispatch, sends negotiators to Napoleon. The armistice he signs will give France control of northern Italy and cement Napoleon's reputation as a military genius. What no one mentions, of course, is how close it had been, how near to total disaster. In later years, Napoleon would rewrite the history of Marengo, downplaying his initial mistake and the role of men like Desailles and Kellerman in salvaging victory. The official narrative would become one of strategic brilliance rather than a desperate comeback. But those who were there, men like you and Marcel, would know the truth, that Marengo wasn't just a victory, it was a miracle. That evening, legend has it that Napoleon, hungry after his near defeat turned stunning victory, asked his chef to prepare him a meal. The chef, finding little in the way of provisions, cobbled together a dish using a scrawny chicken, tomatoes, garlic, and other ingredients foraged from nearby farms. This improvised dish would become known as chicken Marengo, supposedly one of Napoleon's favourites thereafter. Like many good stories, it's probably not entirely true. Napoleon's chef at the time, a man named Dunand, wasn't even with him at Marengo, and tomatoes weren't common in northern Italian cuisine of the period. But again, why let facts get in the way of a good story? As you sit by a campfire that night, sharing a meagre meal with Marcel and the other survivors, the magnitude of what you've just lived through begins to sink in. You've witnessed one of history's most dramatic battlefield reversals, a defeat transformed into victory through a combination of leadership, courage, and simple luck. The little corporal pulled it off again, Marcel says, gnawing on a piece of bread. Don't know how he does it. But you were there. You saw how close it came to disaster, and you can't help but wonder how many more miracles can one man's luck provide? How many more times can defeat be turned to victory? For now, though, you're simply grateful to be alive as you stretch out on the hard ground, your body aching from the day's exertions. As you drift towards sleep, the sounds of the army settling down for the night surround you, so different from the peaceful quiet of your bedroom back home. Unlike your comfortable modern bed with its soft pillows and warm blankets, tonight you'll sleep on Italian soil beneath the stars with only a thin blanket between you and the earth. But you'll sleep as victors, not as defeated men, and sometimes that makes all the difference. The morning after Marengo is strangely quiet. Dawn breaks over a landscape transformed by violence. Yesterday, these fields outside Alessandria were green with summer crops. Now they're churned to mud and stained dark with blood. The air carries the metallic tang of gunpowder mixed with something worse, the beginning of decay, as thousands of bodies lie where they fell. You're one of the lucky ones. You survived. Your regiment took heavy casualties, almost 40%, but you and your friend Marcel made it through with nothing worse than exhaustion and a few scrapes. As you pick your way through the battlefield, helping to collect the wounded, the reality of yesterday's miracle victory sinks in. The French soldiers around you move with the hollow-eyed thousand-yard stare that comes after cheating death. Nobody's celebrating. There's too much work to do, too many friends to bury. This is the part they never tell you about in the recruiting speeches, Marcel mutters, helping you carry a wounded man to the field hospital, really just a collection of tents where overworked surgeons labour non-stop, their aprons so soaked with blood they look like butchers. The day after glory. The wounded man between you whimpers as you jolt over uneven ground. He can't be more than 16, a drummer boy caught by Austrian grape shot. His left leg is a mangled mess below the knee. He'll lose the leg, Marcel says quietly, making sure the boy can't hear. If he's lucky, that's all he'll lose. Death doesn't always come quickly on the battlefield. Sometimes it lingers for days as infection sets in. You've seen it before, the slow spread of putrefaction, the fever, the delirium, men begging for water, then begging for death. You reach the hospital tents and surrender your burden to a harried medical orderly. The smell inside is overwhelming: blood, urine, feces, and the sickly sweet odour of gangrene. The sound is worse: moans, screams, and the terrible wet sounds of surgery performed without anaesthesia. "Come on," Marcel says, pulling you away. "Nothing more we can do here." As you walk back toward your regiment's position, you pass a different kind of tent, larger, with guards posted outside. The Emperor's tent. Not that he's Emperor yet. In 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte is still just the first consul of France, technically one of 3 men sharing power. But everyone knows who's really in charge. They say he slept on the battlefield last night, Marcel tells you, just like he promised. You believe that? You ask. Marcel snorts. Maybe, maybe not, but the men believe it, and that's what matters. That's Napoleon's genius. He knows exactly what his soldiers need to hear, what stories will fire their imagination and loyalty. Whether he actually slept on the hard ground or retired to a comfortable bed in a requisitioned villa doesn't matter. The legend is what counts. And speaking of legends, as you pass the command tent, the flap opens and out steps the man himself. It's your first close look at Napoleon Bonaparte, and he's smaller than you expected, not the tiny figure of later British propaganda, but certainly not imposing, maybe 5'6", with a pale complexion and dark hair cut short in the Roman style. But his eyes, there's something in those grey-blue eyes that makes you straighten automatically, like a schoolboy caught slouching. He's surrounded by a cluster of officers in brilliant uniforms, a stark contrast to his own simple green coat of a colonel of the Chasseurs à Cheval, his favourite regiment of the Consular Guard. While his generals gleam with gold braid and decorations, Napoleon's only ornament is a small tricolour cockade on his plain bicorn hat. He pauses, surveying the battlefield with those penetrating eyes. Then he notices you and Marcel, two common soldiers frozen in mid-step. "From which regiment?" he asks directly, his voice higher than you'd imagined, his accent still carrying traces of his Corsican origins. Marcel snaps to attention. "The 9th Light, Citizen First Consul, Lanz's division. The 9th? You fought well yesterday." Napoleon's gaze moves between you. "Were you present for the final attack?" "Yes, Citizen First Consul," Marcel answers. "We were retreating with the rest when General Desire arrived. We turned and fought." A shadow crosses Napoleon's face at the mention of Desire. A great man. France has lost one of her finest sons. There's genuine emotion in his voice. You've heard that Napoleon and Desire were close friends, comrades from the Egyptian campaign of 1798. Now Desire lies dead, another body cooling on the field of Marengo. "How is the morale in your unit?" Napoleon asks, shifting topics abruptly. Marcel hesitates, and you can see him debating whether to speak the unvarnished truth or a comforting lie. He opts for somewhere in between. The men are tired, Citizen First Consul, and hungry, but proud of yesterday's victory. Napoleon nods, as if this confirms what he already knows. The supply wagons will arrive today. Meanwhile, there will be distributions of captured Austrian provisions. His gaze moves to you. "And you, soldier? Your thoughts?" The question catches you off guard. You're nobody, just one common soldier among thousands. Yet here's Napoleon Bonaparte asking your opinion as if it matters. I think the men would fight better on full stomachs, Citizen First Consul," you manage, immediately regretting your boldness. But Napoleon's mouth quirks in what might be the ghost of a smile. "Indeed, an army marches on its stomach, as I am constantly reminding my quartermasters." He turns to one of his aides. "General Berthier, see to it that food distributions begin immediately, using the Austrian supplies if necessary." "Yes, Citizen First Consul," the aide responds. With a curt nod to you and Marcel, Napoleon continues on his inspection, trailed by his entourage of glittering officers. "Holy shit," you breathe once he's out of earshot. "Did that just happen?" Marcel looks equally stunned. "I think we just became part of the legend, and that's how legends grow, one small interaction at a time, spreading through an army of thousands. By nightfall, the story of Napoleon personally ordering food distributions after speaking with common soldiers will have travelled through the entire camp, growing more impressive with each retelling. The reality